Hey, what's going on everybody? Quadzilla here. I am in beautiful Hawaii. I've been hanging out here with Marvel as I recuperate from the calendar year Triple Crown. So yeah, life's been pretty hard. So in this video, I want to talk about the changes that you can see in your mind and your body after a thru hike. And I've just been reflecting on how I have changed over these years, and especially after last year doing a calendar year Triple Crown. And some of these changes really are kind of like superpowers when I compare them to how I used to be and how I used to operate. And people go and hike for all sorts of different reasons, but I would guess that a large portion of you out there who are interested in hiking or have thru hiked, you're interested in it partially because you're interested in being the kind of person that can accomplish such a feat, and you're interested in having that skill set that can let you persevere and endure and push through months and months and months on end of hiking. I remember my friend Bear, he was a 7'1" hiker and started out just a really challenging situation for him. He could move like 4 miles a day, and he said he wanted to be the kind of man that could finish the Appalachian Trail. Like, that was really important to him, and I think that really struck a chord with me, and I think it probably strikes a chord with a lot of you out there, is that, you know, in addition to all the just crazy adventure and fun, like, you want to be the kind of person who can finish such a monumental task, and in order to do so, you have to develop these skills and attributes, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. So the first superpower is the ability to face fears and anxieties. And I used to be a really fearful, very anxious person, to the point that I would shut myself inside for 80, 90 hours a week just playing video games, barely going out at all. And when I would go out, it would just be to go buy groceries, and just even a trip to the grocery store would give me terrible anxiety, and I would just like worry about it all day, and it was it's a really terrible way to live. And back when I was younger, I had a lot of issues holding me back, but fear was probably the primary issue. Fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, just fear kept me from even attempting all the things that I truly wanted out of life, and it led to me having a very small, limited life, just being sitting inside all day on the computer, because that was the only place where I wasn't afraid and anxious. And looking back on my first hike in 2016, it's kind of hard for me to remember the things that I was afraid of. Just like what I remember is being afraid of hitchhiking, being afraid of wildlife and bears, and rain. Being in the rain in storms was a big one for me for whatever reason. And these are things that I don't even think about anymore. And that's so great about thru hiking, is it really forces you to be out there to face these fears. You don't have the option to sit in your room and to try and avoid these things. Like, you have to hitchhike, you have to be out. If you're on the Appalachian Trail especially, you're gonna be out in storms, and you're gonna have to face these fears. And what you'll find is that as you are forced to face these fears and challenges over and over again, you're gonna learn that the things that you build up in your mind and reality are two completely different things, that things never turn out as bad in reality as what you had built up to be afraid of in your mind. And so the practice is to face your fears and then reflect upon them, and it is a practice. It's everything I talk about in this video requires intentional effort to get the maximum benefits. You can't just expect to breeze through and not think about anything and get the same kind of benefits. So you have to think about it, you have to work on it, but it is so worth the effort. And so this practice is putting yourself in situations where you have no choice but to face your fears, and thru hiking is really, really great for that. Some other things that I've done, like joining the Army, doing wildland firefighting, those are other situations where you just have no choice but to go into these challenges and things that give you anxiety and fear. And that's what I found in all of these different things. Like, I have to put myself in a situation where I don't have another choice, and then it forces me to face what I'm afraid of, and then I learn over and over again that, oh, that's right, fear really is this intangible thing that I build up in my mind, and it has no real substance, and it really is the worst part about any of this. Like, it's getting yelled at by a drill sergeant, or hitchhiking with strangers, or encountering bears. The reality of those things really aren't that bad. It's all the buildup in my mind beforehand that makes them so bad, and that buildup is totally intangible. You just have to lean into it, and you lean into it and you find they will just melt away, and at the end of the experience you're like, what was I afraid of? And you do this over and over and over again, and you slowly build this muscle of just leaning into fear. And that doesn't mean you don't have fear anymore. Like, yeah, I still experience fear and anxiety all the time, but it affects me in a different way. It doesn't stop me cold. It doesn't make me want to turn away and hide. I can turn into it because I can call on all of this past experience and say like, oh, remember all these times you used to be afraid and have anxiety. Just turn into it. And because the actual event isn't going to be that bad at all. Last year I set off to hike the Appalachian, Pacific Crest, and Continental Divide trails, and it's a pretty monumental task, and with it came, there's a lot of fears and anxieties that come with that. But what was interesting was that there wasn't a single moment where those fears kept me from taking action. It was more like I could feel them and acknowledge them, but they didn't affect my decision in any way, because I knew this is what I wanted to do, and I knew that I wanted to be the kind of person that could push myself to those limits and to find what my limits were. And so, in the beginning I was wondering, like, how can I keep this up day after day? So there's the fear of failure, that's a really big one. And then there was the fear of, like, if I say I'm gonna do this and fail, I'm gonna be embarrassed in front of everybody. Fear of, like, failing socially. And there was the fear of grizzly bears. That I still have that fear. I think that's a very normal and rational fear of hiking through grizzly country alone. I had to do a lot of night hiking through grizzly country. And so all of those fears were still there. It doesn't mean I do all this and then I don't have fears, but what I've learned is I can lean into the fear, and as long as I just lean forward and take action, then the fears will dissolve and they don't have to hold me back. And think about how many people never go on a thru hike because they are afraid of failing, or they're afraid of being alone, or they're afraid they're not going to be up to the task. I bet there are magnitudes more people who really want to do something like a thru hike, or just any other thing, start a business, quit their job. There's so many things that people want to do, and what stops them is fear. And so I think this concept is so important, and it has added so much value to my own life. The second skill I want to talk about is the ability to face pain and discomfort, and this is another skill that I used to be really bad at. I've actually only gotten good at endurance things in recent years. I used to just really hate running because of how painful running always was. I would only lift weights, you lift for 30 seconds to a minute and then you rest for 5 minutes, and that was what I was good at and able to do. But I finally got into running and these other long distance endurance things after thru hiking the first time, because that thru hike really taught me to relate to pain in a different way. So since then, I've gone on to run a couple 100-milers, worked a season on a hotshot crew. Last year hiked about 7,400 miles in 9.5 months. And all of these things, they wouldn't have been possible at all if I hadn't changed my relationship with pain and discomfort. So how do you change your relationship to pain and discomfort? And this one, again, it's a practice. It's a practice that you have to put intentional effort into, but the key is equanimity. So equanimity, or to be equanimous, means to be non-reactive. That means you feel the pain of the backpack straps digging into your shoulders. You feel the pain of that pack just riding on your hips. You feel the pain of your legs as you climb slowly uphill, but you feel all of that, but you don't add a second layer by adding a story on top of that by saying like, oh, this is so awful, I wish I was done with this climb, I wish my pack wasn't so heavy. By adding that second layer, or in Buddhism what they call the second arrow, that's what creates the suffering. So if you can just stay with the sensation and eliminate the story of the sensation, then that completely changes your relationship to pain and to discomfort. So whatever you're experiencing, it's really important to relax into it. Doesn't matter how strong your willpower is, you will never be strong enough to be able to just push pain out of your awareness. That's simply impossible. It would be like trying to fight gravity, or it's like trying to fight a law of physics. You simply cannot push pain, you simply cannot ignore it. You have to completely change your relationship to it, and you do that by relaxing into it. You do that by becoming curious about it, to see like, what does the pain really feel like? I wasn't actually feeling, like the pain in my legs or the discomfort of having wet, cold water. What I was experiencing was my reaction to it, and my reaction was negative and it was adverse, and so I felt really bad. But when I was able to kind of push through that layer, get rid of that reaction and just experience the pain, you realize it's just a sensation. And like a good metaphor, a good explanation for this is like extreme heat and extreme cold, they feel the same. They feel exactly the same. Our minds have completely different reactions to it because of the story we layer on top. Once you can actually sit and experience pain just on its own, you find that it's not necessarily a negative experience, it's just a feeling, it's just a sensation, and that is really powerful to be able to see the truth of it. Last year I experienced what was objectively the worst conditions I've ever experienced on any trail, like post-hole for weeks on the Appalachian Trail through just deep snow. I had 110-degree days on the Pacific Crest Trail, and then on the CDT there was blizzards and post-holing again up on those high mountains, 12,000 feet, and some nights that were well below zero. So objectively terrible conditions, but I suffered much less last year than I have on any other trail, on any other experience in my life, because I have been progressively developing the skill of equanimity, the skill of non-reaction, and just really changing my relationship to pain and discomfort. And without this skill, without this changing relationship, I don't think I could have finished the trail last year. So I remember like on the first time I did the CDT, by about 1900 miles, I was just so done. I was over it. It was cold outside. I was tired, and I didn't want to be tired anymore. I didn't want to be cold anymore, and I didn't have the skills to be able to relax into those feelings and to be able to keep going. I just, like, my whole world was consumed by this pain and by the discomfort, and I wasn't able to finish. And I really think that was partly why I got Giardia, was like I was kind of done mentally, and then that allowed me to get sick, and then that gave me a good excuse to quit. But last year I never thought about quitting because it was never all that bad. Even in those objectively terrible situations, I was able to just be in the moment and realize in the moment, like, yeah, it's super hot or it's super cold or I'm really tired, but each moment it was okay. It was just feeling those sensations, and like just feeling those sensations without the story on top. It wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't more than I could handle. It was totally what I could handle. And I, realized that these things aren't going to last forever. The snow doesn't last forever. The trail doesn't last forever. And if I can make it through this minute, I can make it through this hour, I can make it through this day, I can make it through this week. And it's not, not this big consuming big deal. And I think that's why a lot of people quit long trails too, is they think, it's so hard today, how am I gonna make it for another couple months or another 1,000 miles? And again, that idea of just equanimity, just being non-reactive, allows you to be okay in the present moment, so then you don't have to fear, how am I gonna be okay in the future? Because if you're okay now, well, I can just be okay now, and that's all it takes. Just be okay now as the future comes. Now it's now, and now you're okay, and then what do you have to worry about? So out on the trail, I can be tired, I can be hungry, I can be lonely, and it's okay. I can just feel those sensations, and I can be okay. I don't have to add another layer. Don't add that extra layer of, I don't want to be this way, I want to be a different way. That's what's causing your suffering. And all these things I'm talking about, they're a practice. You have to practice, and you have to develop a certain skills. And the skills are, you have to develop focus, you have to develop awareness, and then you have to develop equanimity, so focus. So you can't be having your mind run all over the place, because if you're never able to focus on sensations, then you can't get to the rest of it. You have to have awareness, like you have to be aware of what's going on inside your body, inside your mind. And then the equanimity part is, so with that focus and equanimity, now you can start to see what are my sensations, what am I experiencing, what are my emotions, and then what are the follow-on reactions, my habitual reactions that are coming up. And then once you have awareness of all of that, you can focus on it, and then you can start developing the equanimity and catch yourself like, oh, okay, so I'm climbing a hill and my legs hurt, and now I have this habitual response of saying, man, I hate climbing, this sucks. And so you can just not react that way. And if you can catch yourself, and then what happens is you'll catch yourself once, and then you'll catch yourself again and again, and over time you rewrite those habits so that you are not adding on this extra layer of suffering on top of these physical sensations that you're feeling. So I recommend taking up a mindfulness practice. What I like to practice is Vipassana. They have 10-day courses all across the world, and I found those courses to be super helpful. But there's many different paths, so just find whatever works for you, but you have to practice. And that's what the sitting part of meditation is about, is you're in a controlled environment, so you can practice focus and practice developing awareness and equanimity, and then you bring that with you into the world. And again, that's why I love Thru-hiking for developing these skills. I feel like it's a shortcut in a way, or maybe not a shortcut, but it's just allows you to work on this for, the entire day because you face so many more challenges and fears and pain and discomfort on the trail. And so all day you can be present in your body. You can do, walking meditations. You can just be aware of each foot as it rises and as it falls. You can be aware of your breath. You can be aware of the pain in your body, and that's just perfect time to practice these skills. So when you're climbing, you can be aware of the burning in your legs and then practice not reacting to it. I really want to emphasize just how powerful these practices are and how much value they have added to my life. So been home a couple months now, started going to jiu-jitsu here, and it makes me think back to when I first started jiu-jitsu about 10 years ago. I just couldn't stick with it. And I think that all came back to like this fear of pain and fear of discomfort. I remember being almost physically ill before classes because of how anxious I was about the pain that I was going to face that day. Because jiu-jitsu is not a comfortable sport. Sparring with people, and you're kind of going all out, and it's incredible how much it takes out of your body. And then on top of that, your partners, they're choking you, they're smothering you, they're taking your arms into arm bars, they're cranking down on your neck and your head. And so it's a really painful, not a comfortable sport. And that was why I just never stuck with it. The most I could do at a time, I'd go for like a month, a couple days a week, and then I wouldn't stick with it. But this time, now that I've been here, I've been going to jiu-jitsu 5 days a week. These have been pretty intense classes, 90-minute classes. We roll for 25 to 30 minutes at the end of every class. And it's a lot. Like, my whole body is in pain right now. My joints hurt. I've got bruises all over. I got bruises on my neck. But what's changed is I don't have anxiety going to those classes anymore. I actually really, really look forward to going to class. Like, jiu-jitsu is the highlight of my day. And instead of this like fear-based, like anxiety, pain avoidant thing, I'm just like really happy going to jiu-jitsu and seeing my progress and seeing what I can learn. And that's a completely different person who I am now versus who I used to be 10 years ago. And those are the changes that are possible. I'm really not special in any way. I wish I could show you just how I used to be, when I was younger. Like, these are all skills and practices that I put into practice over the years, and that's what's caused the change. It hasn't been because of any special genetics or anything like that. And I think that's the point I want to get across. Like, if I can do these things, then so can you, so can anybody. And so you can absolutely change the relationship you have to fear. You can change the relationship you have to pain and discomfort, and it will completely open up the world for you. You won't feel trapped, you won't feel small, you won't be scared, and you'll be able to go after and do the things that you really want to do in life. And I think that is really so cool. So let me know if you enjoy this video, and I'll make more. I'm really interested in the mental aspects of through hiking and endurance sports and just life in general, because I think that's kind of the secret, and that's the key to all of life. If you can figure out your mind, then I think you can figure out everything else. So yeah, leave me a comment if you like this. Hit a like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and yeah, have a good one.